Hey all, it's me again. I'm coming to you again from my room as I'm still in self-isolation. Luckily for me, this is the last day of self-isolation for me, and I'm so excited to get out and get back to work. It's felt like forever since I've been at the school or at the church or just in a room with more than 5 people. Honestly, I'm super excited to get back out into the land of the living. Self isolation has been interesting for me. I've done a lot of self reflecting, I've done quite a bit of reading. Shout out to Mr. Danny Collins for the book The Alchemist. I've been enjoying it a ton. But one of the downsides to being stuck inside all day is I'm on my phone a lot and browsing Instagram or just on the internet or whatever, and a lot of the stuff that I see is about the news or current events. And being stuck in self-isolation, there's not much else to do, so I started catching up on some of the current events that are happening around the world, and it can get really, really discouraging. Not to get into a lot of detail, but I just really feel like humanity as a whole is giving away love and just trading that in for hate. I feel like people nowadays are not searching for opportunities to create connection and relationship with each other, but instead are searching for ways to push down the other people around them. I just feel like our world is being taken over by hate, and it can honestly get really discouraging. And so here I am stuck in self-isolation, and I decided to look at some Bible stories that maybe I can relate to a little bit. And I found one in 1 Kings 18 and 19. So to give you guys a little bit of context for the story I'm about to share with you, this is after King David and King Solomon. Now everyone in Judea knew that the Messiah was going to come from the line of King David and King Solomon. So they were watching that line, waiting for the Messiah to be born and to come and be the best king that they've ever seen, right? And so with each king that was appointed from the line of David, everyone was like, is this the one? And unfortunately, they just kept on getting worse. There was a couple good ones in there. A couple people made some good decisions, but on average, I would say the kings in the story from 1 Kings and 2 Kings is just not very good. They were not pretty great people. They were making a lot of mistakes and leading Israel where they should not have been. A lot of it involved idol worship, devil worship, child sacrifice, just really messed up stuff. And one of the kings that was really tied up into what he shouldn't have been was King Ahab. King Ahab got married to a woman named Jezebel. And now Jezebel was not an Israelite. Jezebel did not believe how the Israelites believed, and she introduced her gods to the Israelite people. And because she was the queen, you're not going to say, I'm not going to worship this, because she was like, I'll kill you if you don't. And they were like, I really don't want to die. So the Israelite people started worshiping Jezebel's gods, mainly a god named Baal, spelled Baal. And there was someone around that was not worshiping those gods. His name was Elijah. Now, Elijah was a prophet. What I mean by that is Elijah was tasked by God to speak out directly to the entire culture of the Israelites, and more specifically King Ahab, and let him know, hey, these things that you're doing, they're not okay. Like when Ahab literally killed a farmer just to take his land. And Elijah was like, bro, that's not okay. You can't just kill anyone you want to kill and take their land. And Ahab was like, well, guess what? I'm the king, so I'm going to do it anyway. Guess what? You have no power over me. Yeah. And then Elijah got a little bit upset, right? And so he starts talking to God, and he decides that he is going to challenge Jezebel's gods, right? Because that's the root of the issue here, that people were replacing in their hearts, the Israelite people, and King Ahab were replacing in their hearts the spot for God with another idol, with something else that wasn't God. And so the entire culture was degrading as a whole. And so Elijah takes it upon himself to do something about it. And so he walks up to Ahab, and by the way, there's a massive drought going on. It hasn't rained in 3 years, right? And Elijah comes up to Ahab and says, hey, look, your God doesn't really exist, doesn't really like you. How about we settle this up on top of a mountain, right? And so Ahab was like, what are you suggesting? And Elijah's like, you and me. You send all of your prophets, which was, let me see, about 450 prophets of Baal showed up to the top of Mount Carmel. And Elijah came representing God. So 450 prophets were representing Baal, and Elijah was the only one representing God. And Elijah had a lot of faith at this point in the story, right? So these prophets of Baal, basically they had 2 altars built, one for Baal and one for God. And Elijah was like, I'll let you guys go first. Whatever altar is burnt up by the end of this showdown is the real God in whom Israel is supposed to serve. And the prophets were like, all right, bet. And Elijah's like, here's a catch. You can't light it yourself. And they're like, oh, okay. So they get really into it. Now, we know that Baal isn't real. But I'm not so sure if these guys knew that, because like they were like really into it. They were like screaming for Baal to come down. They were like praying their hearts out. Some of them started cutting themselves and like yelling to Baal. And Elijah's sitting there, and he's like, man, Elijah must have had a sense of humor, because he saw these guys just flailing their arms around, cutting themselves, bashing their heads on rocks, trying to get Baal's attention. And so Elijah, knowing that Baal isn't real and that Baal is not powerful, knowing the end story, Elijah goes, hey, why don't you guys scream a little louder? Maybe he's on the pot. Maybe he's going to the bathroom. And so they scream louder. He's like, oh, maybe he's asleep. Maybe he's asleep. You guys need to yell a little louder. Come on, be an alarm clock, guys. Come on. And that just infuriates them more. And so they scream louder and louder, and they start cutting themselves more and more. And then Elijah goes, all right. I'm over it. Time for me to show you who the God of Israel really is. And so Elijah tasks the people around him to go and get water. Now, granted, we're in a drought, right? It hasn't rained in 3 years. Water's very valuable right now. But he convinces them to do it, right? So they build a 2-foot ditch. I think it was 2 feet. Close to 2 feet. And they build a ditch, or dig rather, a ditch all the way around the altar, and they fill it up with water. And then they fill up the entire altar with water. They just soak it with water. And the prophets of Baal are like, well, ours didn't light. His obviously isn't going to light. Look how much water he has on it. Nothing could light it. The logs are waterlogged. There's water all around it. There's water all through it. Like, come on. We got this one in the bag. At least, even though our altar didn't get burned down, at least his isn't going to get burned down either. And Elijah walks up and he gets on his knees and he says, God, show these people who you are. Show them who you really are. And fire from heaven comes down and leaves a crater where the water and the altar used to be. And Elijah stands up in front of the crowd that was watching this and says, this is the God that we're supposed to be serving, not Baal, right? And then Elijah tasks everyone with killing the prophets of Baal. Things got a little bit out of hand, a little crazy. If you want to read it, it's 1 Kings 18, verses 20 to 40. And it gets a little crazy. But after that, Elijah goes up to Ahab, King Ahab, and says, go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of the rushing of rain. And then it just starts pouring. Once Israel realized that God, the God of Israel, the real God, our God, was the only real God, the drought stopped. And you think that that was the end of the story, right? Like, great, God won, the drought's over, Elijah proved himself, Elijah proved God to the people of Israel, the prophets of Baal are no more. But then in chapter 19, Jezebel hears about it. Here's what Elijah did and what happened at the top. And instead of realizing that she was in the wrong and that she served a God that wasn't real and wasn't powerful, she got upset. She got real mad. In chapter 19, verse 1 reads, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how he killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. A little bit confusing what she was saying, but basically she was saying, may the gods, or her gods, Baal, may they kill me if I don't kill you by this time tomorrow. And you know, when I read this story, I look and I see Elijah as a man who stood in front of 450 prophets of a false god and taunted them because he knew the power of his God. That dug a ditch around his altar, filled it with water, filled his altar with water too, because he knew the power of the God that he served. But when Jezebel turned and said, I'm going to kill you, what did Elijah do? He should have stayed there and said, no, I have the power of God on my side. You can try. But Elijah got spooked, and homie ran. Homie ran far, and homie ran fast. He went to a cave, and he hid in a cave where an angel started to bring him food. And he had a conversation with God, and basically he said, God, just let me die already. There's no point. She's going to kill me. Just let me die. And God was like, here, I closed my Bible. I don't know why I closed my Bible. But in 1 Kings chapter 19, God approaches Elijah and he talks to him. And Elijah, like I said, he's like, God, just let me die. I'm the only one around that has you in my heart. There's no point anymore. And God says to Elijah, Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. God said more to Elijah, but that's the last of their conversation. Because God said, it's not just you, Elijah. It's not just you. I have 7,000 more that you know nothing about. You thought everyone that served me is dead, but you're wrong. I have 7,000 more just like you who love me and have me first in their heart. And Elijah was comforted by that. And I think at that moment, Elijah started to remember all the things that God did through his life. Before Elijah was up on Mount Carmel, he brought back a dead child for a widow. Through the power of God, not through his own power. And so when I think about Elijah, I kind of relate him to myself because, he was in self-isolation. I was in self-isolation. I know it's a little bit of a stretch, but I kind of feel what he's feeling. I look around at the world and I get so discouraged. And I'm like, God, what is going on? What is happening to this world that I'm living in? And that's what Elijah felt. He felt like he was the only person in the world that trusted the Lord with his heart. And God said, no, I've got 7,000 more. And I think God's saying to me, no, Caleb, I have 7,000 more. I have people that trust me, that love me. And just because when you scroll on Instagram, all you see is negativity, that doesn't mean that that's the reality that we're living in. And if I just listen to God and let him into my heart and stop worrying about what I see on Instagram, what I see on Facebook, or what I see on Reddit, maybe I can start being the change that I want to see in this world. I also think that it's important for us to remember what God has done through us and for us. I think Elijah lost sight of the powerful and beautiful things God did through him while he was hiding up in that cave. But when God spoke to him, God reminded him about all of the glorious things that God has done through him and for him in his life. Ellen White says, "We have nothing to fear for the future unless we forget the ways that God has led us in our past." So I want to challenge you today to think about how God has led you in your past, to think about how God has rescued you. And I want to encourage you and tell you that God is going to rescue you again, as well as this world. Anyway, have a great day.